Hi, I wonder whether you can comment on your thoughts on whether what you eat and when you eat it matter.
Okay. That's a surprisingly complex question to answer, but you'll forgive me as I answer the question. I'll start with the when first, because that's probably a quicker answer. Okay. So when you eat actually does matter. Okay, so people think, oh, breakfast like a king, eat lunch like a prince and eat dinner like a pauper, and most cultures have this particular saying. So what we are designed to do, and we clearly are diurnal animals, so we stay awake, broadly speaking, in the daytime and sleep at night. So what our body does is to make sure that when we're awake, which is when we're going to be eating, our metabolism is at its highest because it's getting ready to receive all the food. Okay, so clearly when you eat, when your metabolism is highest, then it deals with the food better. Whereas if you eat late at night before you go to bed, then you have a situation in which your metabolism is going to be lower. So there is a classic scenario. You could be eating exactly the same number of calories at a different time of the day, but you get differing amounts from that. That being said, it's surprisingly small. So in other words, I don't think that's the cause of the obesity epidemic. I do think it plays a contributory role. I mean, there are epidemiological studies that show, for example, that shift workers are slightly heavier, right, than people that don't work shifts. So it does matter, but it's not the cause. What do we eat? Does it matter? Absolutely. Okay, so, and we have to my mind, we have to get away. We have to eat healthier, we have to think about food, but we have to get away from calorie counting. And the reason why we have to get away from calorie counting is because I think it's an imperfect, it's a lousy science, okay? Because we never consider caloric availability when we're dealing with calories. What do I mean by that? If you eat 100 calories of sugar, okay, and you actually eat it or drink it, you will probably get 100 calories of sugar out, okay, into your body because your base level of fuel is sugar. If you had 100 calories of sweet corn on a cob, and you peeked into the loo the next day, you'll know that you have absorbed nowhere near 100 calories of sweet corn. Yet, if you take 100 calories of sweet corn, dry it, pound it into a flour, turn it into a flour tortilla, and eat it, then you'll get a lot more calories out of the exact same amount of corn. So here we have a situation where you go to Tesco's, whatever, other supermarkets are available, where you actually go 100 calories of sugar, 100 calories of corn, and 100 calories of a flour tortilla. It's exactly 100 calories, but they all have different caloric availabilities. You can take the difference between a steak and a mince that's been put into a lasagna and cooked for 4 hours, all right? So you have a steak that's been cooked rare, 400 calories versus that. That is always going to be calorically, the steak, less available. So what you eat does matter, okay? So in other words, just calorie counting doesn't help us in any way. The quality of the calorie does matter. When the calorie is absorbed, it is a unit of energy. It's an SI, well, that's not an SI unit. A megajoule is an SI unit. But it's a unit of energy that is, yes, every calorie is equal. But because we can't get at all the calories, some calories are more equal than others. So yes, what you eat matters.
Thank you. And the gentleman over this side, please.
I'll do shorter answers. I'm really sorry. It was a long answer. Ask a less complex question.
Hopefully so. Yeah. Is this on? Yeah, thank you. Great presentation. Good stuff. Hopefully my question is a stupid question, but I'm not too sure.
There are no stupid questions.
I'm not too sure, that's why I'm going to ask it. A couple of months ago, I gave up smoking, filthy habit, yeah? In order to get rid of the craving for a smoke, I've started eating. And I should say in 2 months, easily I've put on 1.5 stone, maybe more. Body mass index obviously has gone up. I haven't grown in height, but I've got a lot fatter, yeah? Now, unless the craving stops, I'm going to carry on eating and eating, and I'm going to become obese. Stupid bit of a question. Are my genetics likely to change at all in this?
No. But can I answer the question? Let's not be depressing. So yes, it is well known that smoking suppresses appetite. I mean, this is why models do it. This is why a lot of people, I mean, some people smoke because they smoke, but for example, in the modeling industry, the fashion industry, it's been known for a while. Why? nicotine plays a role, and there are other emerging data which could include other mechanisms. There are also reasons that are probably not going to be biological. They have to do with plausibly the habit. So in other words, where you are actually doing something, you have done something for a very long time, such as smoking, and when that goes, you need something else to do, and so eating then also takes that space. So I think that it's going to be a mix of both. It's going to be a removal of nicotine from the system and other molecules, and it's going to be a situation of doing something which is plausibly explaining what you do. That being said, the smoking is going to kill you a hell of a lot quicker than the body weight. I mean, there is no safe, I'm sorry for people who smoke, I'm just going to say it, there is no safe dose of smoking, whereas there is a safe dose of food, right? So I think it's one of these situations, the answer is not to go back to smoking by any ways. If you've quit and you're out, dude, you're going to be living a hell of a lot longer than if you were smoking. So that's all I have to say, and I think you're just going to have to, I don't have an easy answer. I'm really sorry, I don't have an easy answer. It is going to be difficult. Can I say something? Anybody who says, I have an effortless way of losing weight, to you. Anybody, now science, there are no absolutes in science, I appreciate this, except here, okay? If anyone tells you it's easy to lose weight, they're lying to you, because it's gonna be difficult. So I'm sorry, I don't have anything more positive to say, except you'll live longer because you've stopped smoking.
Okay, lovely. Yep. There's a lady, you got one over there first? Yes, and then the lady down here.
Uh-huh.
And then I'll come over this side.
Is this working?
Yes.
This is a really simple question, I think, but visceral fat's supposed to be more active in terms of metabolic syndrome, etc.
Yeah.
Is that genetic, the predisposition to store fat around the viscera rather than subcutaneously, or is it just about sheer volume of fat?
Nope, entirely genetic. There is no, once again, very depressing for those of you who carry. So just to be clear what visceral fat is, okay? Visceral fat is the fat that makes you apple-shaped. It doesn't mean that everyone with a big belly or a wobbly belly like me, wobble, okay, has visceral obesity. Obesity, there are two types of fat. There's subcutaneous fat, and this is fat that lives under the skin, gives you the wobble factor everywhere, including my cheek pouches over here, okay? And there's the stuff which actually lives around the organs. The stuff that lives around the organs gives you a tight belly. So in other words, it's going to be tight. That is when you know you have the central obesity. Whereas the stuff that's a little bit wobbly, and once again, no pejorative use here because I'm describing me, okay, that's going to be the case. It's entirely genetically determined. People who says, this diet is going to stop you from getting visceral fat. BS. So, there we go. Mm-hmm.
So the lady there in green, thank you.
Yep.
On this side still. Yep.
Hi, thank you for the great talk.
Mm-hmm.
My curiosity is about obesity in pregnancy.
Yep.
So we all know that pregnant women tend to put on weight.
Yep.
I'm just wondering how does it work in terms of those hormones that you mentioned, the leptin and all this?
Okay, so we are all human beings, okay, until you become pregnant. Then for that 9... husbands or wives, okay. But can I finish? So meaning that when you are a human being that is not pregnant, then you are a human being. But it's not a problem. What happens in pregnancy is there is a huge number of changes that need to occur because there is a parasite in you. Okay, so that's actually there. And you also need to be able to eat more than you need for yourself because you also need to fuel the baby. So huge hormonal changes that actually occur during pregnancy, and so all pregnant women gain weight. Now, there is going to be a genetic element there about how much weight you put on and how easy that you actually lose their weight. I mean, I know ladies who have given birth to 2 or 3 children, but they're like rubber bands. They go, baby, right? And then there are others in which it's actually a gradual increase. Once again, that's going to be down to your biology. It's going to be, it's always a good question to ask, better than any genetic test, is what does my mom look like? Or what does my dad look like? Sometimes it can be depressing, but it's very informative. So the answer is there are huge hormonal changes, and it does play a big role, yes. What happens is you become insensitive to the effects of leptin temporarily, so that you eat more. So yes, absolutely, it plays a huge role. A pregnant woman's hormonal responses is not comparable to someone who's not pregnant. It's just very different. So I mean, pregnant obesity is a different type of obesity. It's a different type of hormonal explanation to obesity when you're not pregnant, which is what I meant by a different species. That's what I meant. Yeah,
Okay, so let's go with this side. Oh my goodness, lots of questions. Maybe just the two at the top, and then we'll bring the microphone down here. Thank you.
Hi, I really enjoyed that. I
Thank
just
you.
wanted to go back to your histogram.
Yep.
Does that mean that basically the population is going to continue to get fat? Do we have a propensity to take the genetics that are more prone to obesity just through surviving on the Serengeti or somewhere?
I think I understand your question. So in other words, is there going to be a maximum point we reach, or will we continue getting more and more obese?
Well, on the histogram through time,
Yep.
it was moving up.
That's
there
right.
were more people with a
That's
high
right.
BMI, and you felt that was not just environmental. That was because we have more people with the genetics to get fat.
So no. So the genes would have been the same. The environment is what has changed is what has changed how obese we've become. So okay, I understand your question now. So a question, or at least another way of asking the question is, have our genes changed? And if not, why has the changing environment made our genes change? What are our genes, after all, other than a way of interacting with the environment? We've adapted to the environment by changing our genes. So you have to imagine a scenario. I'm going to give you a very slightly facetious example. Imagine I had a twin, okay, next to me, and if under one condition both of us stood next to each other, we looked the same and we were standing up in the same way. Let's change the environment, okay? In the next environment, someone comes along and shoves me, okay, and pushes me, gives me a hard push. Unbeknownst to anyone that's here, my twin has ruptured his Achilles tendon, okay, or something like that, okay? He's only standing up because he's balancing, whereas when someone comes along and pushes them over, suddenly he falls over, whereas me with a functioning Achilles tendon tenses and actually stands up straight. We were the same person with the same genes, it's just the environment exposed that different genetic change that was there. So that shift in the curve, all of the genes were there already, the environment has exposed it. The question to ask is why has everyone not become obese, okay, given that change? Because there was no universal response for too much food. There is a universal response for too little food, and that is called starvation and hence death, okay? So that's a pretty hard measurement, and so therefore if you didn't eat, you would die. So therefore, the universal response to starvation is to eat. The problem is because there was no cap on what happens to the genes which made you eat more, because there was no reason to. When suddenly there's a lot of food, you suddenly have the biological variation of why some people get fatter than others.
Great. And there's a question behind, and then I'll come down here.
Thank you. You talked a bit about, a lot about the cravings we get because of the hormones, and touched briefly on why we may not have cravings to eat broccoli, for example.
I don't have cravings to eat broccoli. Some people might, yeah.
For the calorie density, etc. But
Yeah.
how much would you say that microbes in the gut could actually affect the cravings you have for different foods, and how easily it is to change microbes that you have in your gut, and how that might be a part to play in reducing obesity?
Okay, well, that's a very good question. So your microbes, for those of you who don't know, we're packed full of bugs. Some people used to say that there are more bugs in us than there are cells. That, as it turns out, is an overstatement, but they're the same number, okay? So there's trillions of bugs in us. Undoubtedly, they play a big role in how we handle our food because they are the front line in very many ways. Our food gets there, it does a lot of the fermentation that is actually over there. So people ask me, is microbiome studies, the study of the gut, is it good science or is it bad science? I think it's new science. We don't know enough about it. What do we know for sure? Know with a capital K or capital N for yeah. So know with a capital K. We know that what your gut bacteria are is a very good reflection of your environment. So for example, I'm Chinese, okay, but I bet you if you took, but I Westernized, okay, I've been brought up in the West. If you took an ancestor of mine or a cousin of mine that still lived in China and looked at their poop, okay, and measured their gut bugs, it's going to be very different from mine because of what I eat compared to what they eat. There's a very good reflection of it. Is it going to be different because I'm fat rather than thin? It is. But I think those changes have to do with the environment rather than causative at the moment. I may be proven to be wrong. So as we begin to understand more about these gut microbiota, the bugs, I think we'll begin to really understand different types. Does it mean that somebody with a different type of bugs can eat more corn because they are able to break it down a bit more? Are they going to be able to eat more meat? But we don't know enough about the science yet. I will be unsurprised if it plays a role. I don't know. I would be surprised if it is a major driver, like eating at the right time. I would be surprised if it is a major driver of the obesity epidemic.
Thank you. This gentleman here, please.
Great questions, guys.
Hi, I've observed a pattern of seasonal pattern of behaviour with me that I tend to eat more carbs in the run-up to Christmas, culminating in Christmas, and I've ascribed that to being a Northern European laying down fat for, to get me through to summer. Is there any evidence there's a genetic component to that kind of macro behaviour, or am I just making it up?
So that will be then the seasonal, ultradian, that's what they call ultradian rhythms, seasonal biology. I don't know how much is known or if it exists in human beings, or is what you're describing a cultural setup as we run up to Christmas? Okay, so the answer is I don't know. It clearly exists in hibernating elements, in polar bears, in any number of things that are there. So is it impossible it happens to humans? I think it's probably less likely, because you have to remember that human beings were evolved on the African subcontinent and then moved upwards, and so things like skin color changed and what have you. But I don't think we've suddenly become seasonal necessarily. I may be proven to be wrong, and that would be fine. But at the moment, I think that your behavior is more likely to be culturally driven. It's interesting you mentioned Christmas, for example, as you run up to it. And I think it's more culturally driven than it is going to be genetically different, because we are biologically not seasonal animals.
Okay, well, we've nearly run out of time, but I just want to squeeze in a little question for myself.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay? So I was just thinking about the sort of scales that you had just now, and a lot of the questions, a lot of the talk has been about appetite and calories in. Are any of the genes that you were talking about here to do with the other side? So how fidgety you are, maybe how likely you are to walk up the escalator than stand there, or is there any variability in that?
That's a very good question. I'm going to answer the first question, meaning that in terms of the genes which I've shown you, and I know you didn't look at every single gene, none of them have to do with energy expenditure and burning. That's not because it's not there. That's because it's more difficult to measure. Okay, it's easier to measure body weight, clearly, because it's that easy to measure, and more difficult, but eating, because there is a piece of matter, you are consuming the piece of matter that is weighable. The problem with energy expenditure, either in exercise, either in the amount of heat you give off, is very difficult to measure. So that's the first thing. Undoubtedly, it's going to be there. We know people who can eat slightly more. We know twins, for example. There have been studies that have shown that if you take twins and feed them exactly the same thing, if you're identical twins, you'll gain the same amount of weight. If you're non-identical twins, you won't. Okay? So I think it's a matter of making sure we begin to find it. That being said, I think the primary driver is always going to be eating, simply because of the numbers. What do I mean by that? It takes me, maybe you guys slower, it takes me 90 seconds to finish a Mars bar, okay? And that's 250 calories, 300 calories if I'm hungry. It'll take someone, an average person, 25 minutes to 30 minutes on a treadmill to burn it off. The numbers are never in your favor. If you run enough, if you're Mo Farah, you'll burn it off. We're not Mo Farah. So yes, there's going to be genetic and variability there. We can't find it at the moment because they're difficult to measure, but even if we do find it, it's unlikely to be playing the major role. That's
Perfect.
The answer.
Lovely, thank you. That's all we've got time for. Please, ladies and gentlemen, join me in thanking Giles.